But these are the pictures. This is called forced mobilization, and it's taking place in Ukraine. And look, I get it. They're running out of soldiers, and they need to do everything they do. And maybe some of these people should have volunteered and have been hiding or something. But this just looks terrible for the rest of the world, that Ukraine has to resort to fighting with people in communities, taking them off the streets and sending them to the front lines. What do you make of this?
Well, I mean, it kind of undercuts the whole argument that you hear in the United States that Ukraine is defending itself and the proud Ukrainian people want to repel Russian aggression.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the Ukrainians are pro-Russian. I doubt most are. But if the Ukrainian people don't support this war, it is by definition illegitimate. Ukraine has no sovereignty. It hasn't since at least 2014, and it probably never had sovereignty, actually, depending how you define it. But the truth is, Ukraine is not a nation. It is a client state of NATO and the United States, our leadership, and it is being used as a tool to achieve an end, and that end is the destruction of Russia. Now, again, as noted, why would we want to do that? I have no idea. I think it's bizarre and wrong, but that's what it is. It's not a sovereign country fighting for its freedom. It is a poor, pathetic, sad, destroyed country that we destroyed.
Yes,
by the way, we're only here in the first place because the Biden administration and previous administrations, including Bush, all pushed Ukraine to join NATO and therefore put nuclear weapons on Russia's border. Like, why would you ever want to do something like that? Well, only if you wanted a war would you do that. Only if you wanted Russia to respond with violence, which they did, would you do that. Now, why would you want Russia to respond that way? So you could have a war with Russia and break up Russia because you hate the idea of Russia. Again, nobody supports this. I think the majority of Ukrainians and Poles say they want an end, a negotiated end to this war. Americans don't support this. The only people who support this are the deranged leaders of the West. That's it.
Yeah, and by the way, Russians, I talk to them, obviously. I play golf on weekends, and some of my friends that I play golf with, by the way, they get angry at Putin. They think that, he's not doing enough. They want him to respond in kind to some of the threats. And
I know.
And they're like saying, well, he needs to do this. And you hear it. So there's constant conversation taking place. The other thing I hear on the golf course and in other places when I talk to drivers and people around Moscow is they don't have anything against the Ukrainian people. You don't hear this vile sense of, we're going to get those guys. Not at all. As a matter of fact, you get a sense that they feel like those are their brothers, those are their cousins, that they have a history with them. I mean, an earnest sense of camaraderie with Ukraine, a country they're at war with, which is weird, right?
Well, right. So everybody involved in this, the populations of Ukraine, Russia, and the United States are all pawns in someone else's game, obviously. Yeah. So why would you send a drone onto a beach in Russia? Why would you blow up its oil refineries? Why would you hit a school? What you're doing, of course, is trying to force Putin to react with violence, force Putin to escalate in a public way. So the United States and NATO are behind these attacks, as noted. Most people in the West have no idea they're even happening. So the point is to push Putin into a place where he cannot ignore this, where his population and the different power centers within Russia put so much pressure on Putin that he has to respond to the hypersonic missile into Warsaw or Hamburg, or has to hit a NATO country either with a hypersonic weapon or some kind of weapon, perhaps even a tactical nuclear weapon. And at that point, you can say, Putin's the aggressor. That's exactly what's happening right now. And I've made this case to a lot of people, including a lot of policymakers in Washington. You have this caricature of Putin as an absolute dictator who can do whatever he wants, who has total latitude in his decisions. And that's not true of any leader. Every leader rules by consensus. I don't care if you're a king or a president or a prime minister. I don't care if you call yourself the Messiah. You are still operating within certain boundaries. And those boundaries are the opinions of other people with power in your country. And so if Russians over time get upset enough about these attacks, the government of Russia will have to respond, will have to escalate. And that is the whole point. Trust me.
Yeah, they're angry. My sense is that, yes, they're angry. They think Putin is too restrained.
Exactly.
And then they're also angry at the people who they think are responsible for these bombs, and it's not Ukraine. They're angry at
of course
the
not.
EU and NATO and Brussels and the UK. That's who they're angry at. They think it's Europe.
Is it really the EU and Brussels? I know that Russians think that, and of course they lost 27 million people or whatever in a war with some of these countries. So
Yeah.
I understand that there's a lot of history here. However, do we really think that the EU or even NATO have sovereignty, that they're making independent decisions, that they're acting in their own interests? Obviously not. Do you think the population of Germany wants this, or even Britain? Britain is the most warlike of all. But do you really think they want this? Of course they don't. They are also pawns in whatever this is. And of course, it's a great global realignment of power. As the East rises and the West declines, there has to be, in the view of the people mapping this out, some confrontation that just resets the board, resets the international monetary system, the terms of trade. All of this stuff is going to be reset, and the only way to reset it is with a global war. That's very obvious to me. So I understand the frustration, but let's be clear-eyed here.
Well,
Europe has no ability to make independent decisions. It's got American troops on its soil, and it has for 80 years. You know what I mean?
There was like a missile attack or a drone attack on a beach in Russia, where families were gathered and they were just having a holiday. I don't know if we've got this video or not. If we have it, you can show it, guys. If not, no big deal. But you could actually see the drone go and hit a beach where children are building like sandcastles. There it is, Tucker. I don't know if you've seen this. This just happened last week. And 4 kids, like building sandcastles with their families, were killed. 8 people were killed in total. The number may be higher now. But it just doesn't seem like it makes sense that these drones, manufactured by American companies, by the way, and by British companies, and by French companies, and by German companies, are constantly hitting civilians in Russia. And this is not about whether you're for Ukraine or Russia or whoever you choose to like in this war. The idea that you can take a drone on a beach and kill families and children playing and building sandcastles, that's immoral. It's wrong. It shouldn't happen. And we should know about it. And we should ask for people to stop it as Americans.
I couldn't agree more. And by the way, those were targeted by the U.S. government. I mean, CIA gives the targeting information to all this stuff. And so this is an American war against Russia. And again, even if you hate Russia, you can acknowledge that's crazy behavior, because what do you think you're going to get if it continues? And if I can just level one criticism at the Russian government.
Yeah, of course.
It's that this has been going on for a long time. There have been drone attacks on mainland Russia, including in Moscow, for a long time, and assassinations in Moscow as well. And in fact, I was there 2.5 years ago, and all of a sudden I'm driving by the Kremlin and it's on fire. And I asked, like, what is that? And they're like, oh, it's nothing. So the Russian government has not wanted to acknowledge attacks within Russia by the Ukrainians and NATO. And I understand the thinking there, but I think the effect of that has been that people have no idea it's even happening. And they also, moreover, don't know that Ukraine has been taken over not by Nazis. I know everyone uses that. They're all Nazis. They're Bolsheviks, actually. This is very much like the Bolshevik takeover of Russia in 1917 by people who were mostly not Russian and who had no interest in Russia as a coherent country. And that has happened in Ukraine. And all the familiar repression has followed. Elimination of freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of religion, banning the biggest church in Ukraine. It is a Bolshevik state. And we don't say that out loud. We pretend that they're freedom fighters or whatever. No. That country has descended into darkness, into totalitarian darkness. And we are funding it. And we are allowing this to happen. Meanwhile, the actual nation of Ukraine, Ukrainian people, have been totally destroyed. There is no Ukraine anymore because they have been pulverized in the meat grinder of this war that we're directing. So the whole thing is like one of the great tragedies of our age. But I just want to say it for the third time. We are moving toward a global conflict that will destroy millions of people. And so anyone pushing that is by definition immoral, obviously.
There's pictures. There's another set of videos that have been coming out as well. And I don't know how you feel about this. It's really weird. It's almost like the idea that somebody would go into a community and start taking people off the streets, and you see their wives and their children coming out and say, don't take my husband, don't take my dad.